Hey everybody, it's Rob Muffet. Guys, I don't know how many of you actually go to my channel. You may just subscribe and go to the videos when you're notified of them. But when you go to my channel, there's a couple of photos here. This photo is one I used to manufacture and sell underwater video camera housings. This was the least expensive one I would make a long time ago, and this is a photo I took of it for a sales promotion. Uh, and this is one of the cameras on the beach. However, this photo of me on this little boat. This is the best sailboat I ever owned. It's one of my favorite boats of all time. And I bought it from a neighbor of mine, very good friend, him and his wife, Lisa, Jeff and Lisa. This is the photo they took of me out on the boat one day. And I thought it would be fun to go over the 12.5 foot Guppy sailboat, which I think is one of the best small sailboats that was ever manufactured. Let's go over. I went online. I don't have a lot of um, I don't have a lot of video or photos of the boat, but I found some photos online and I thought we would go over in detail about the little guppy. This is somebody's boat of the guppy in Texas. You can get a good frontal view of it. It's the biggest 12.5 foot sailboat I think they ever made. It's got a little keel on the bottom. It's made of fiberglass and it'll sail two people, although we've been out with four. And you can go out in all types of weather. It's just a fun little boat, inexpensive to own, to buy, to sail, to maintain. This is the trailer. It has problems. We'll talk about it in a minute, but it was a very lightweight square frame metal tubing trailer that came with it. Very easy to take the boat rigging down, set back up. Here you can see the rudder. This is the only flaw in the whole boat, I think. We'll talk about the rudder in a minute. Here's another. You can get an idea that the flags are almost as big as the sail. I think the total sail area is like 80 square feet. This is me. One of my happiest times I ever had was for a few years when I lived 17 years on Biscayne Bay. But the happiest times of those 17 years was when I had this little boat. There were like 12 or more boats at the dock where I lived at Banyan Bay. And I think without boasting or bragging or exaggerating, that I went out on my boat more in a year than everybody else at the dock combined. I just sailed the boat to pieces and I would go out in all types of weather and it was just a blast. It was never on a trailer, it was always in the water, just where you can see the flags. The wind blew them to pieces. But I have a little game fisher outboard here. We have a bimini, and the jib is forward, hanked on, ready to go. I would uh, leave the dock if the wind was coming from the east and head toward the islands with my outboard or my little electric. Later, trolling motor was much better. And that way I have a wind shadow and I could raise my sails, be in the wind shadow. However, if the wind wasn't directly from the east, if it was from northeast or south uh, west, I could leave the dock with sails up, and I would come back under sail with sails up. It was a blast. Um, Also, the water here is one of the deepest water of North Biscayne Bay. You have the old Lemon City Channel right about here, and so you don't have to worry too much. There's it's kind of difficult to sail a keel boat in North Biscayne Bay because it's so shallow, but I would do it anyway. Now you can see the interior of the boat. I have a cushion here because I'm 6 foot tall, and the seats were kind of low, so after a while my knees would hurt. But you can have access to everything, the main sheet, the tiller, the jib sheet, everything is within you can grab it by just leaning over and getting toward it. It's handy, easy boat to sail. Very responsive. You had a little bit of a weather helm, just a tiny bit, but as I use it, eventually I was able to get some latex tubing and some other bungee cords, and just I could, with the wind was on the beam or just a tiny bit forward, I could actually sail into self-steer without having to touch the tiller. I would just sit with my back against the cabin and put a big grin on my face and just sit still because it was so small a boat. If you would move, you would change the sail trim and then you'd change the direction sail. But it was the first time I actually felt like I was a real sailor when I was self-sailing my little boat. But it was I learned a lot, had so much fun, and it was just a joy. And going out during the weekday at North Biscayne Bay, there was nobody out there. You on the weekends, different story, but during the week, if you go out, the whole bay would be empty because the water's so shallow, hardly any boats would go out there. So you'd be surrounded by the city with 1.5 million people, but you'd be out all by yourself in nature. It was just you'd see sea cows, you'd see dolphins, you'd see turtles, fish, all sorts of things. It was just a place to sail, and a wonderful place to be. This is how the boat liked to be sailed, a little bit keeled over just a bit. Also because the boat was so short, when you keeled it over, it gave it a little bit longer waterline, so you'd go a tiny bit faster. You could sail this boat in so long as you had a breath of air, you could make it move, you could make it go. And if the wind was too strong, I would go out with just the mainsail up and take the jib down, or put the jib up and take the mainsail down. There was no reefing points in the mainsail. This sail, all both sails were actually made very well. And I think that was one of the things that contributed to the success of the enjoyment of sailing this boat was how well the sails performed. I wasn't an experienced or knowledgeable sailor as far as racing or getting the most out of a sail. I mean, I knew how to sail, but I didn't have the expertise that a lot of racers do. And I think the fact that my sails were made so well, I was able to do as well as I did against some other boats that are actually larger than mine. Sometimes I would sail with my friend Jeff. He had a Compac, which is 16-foot boat, much bigger, a lot more sail. And oftentimes I would keep up with him. Uh, on some tacks, occasionally I would even beat him for a tiny bit, but only for a tiny bit. But most of the time he would beat me because it's a much bigger boat. But if anything was my size, or somebody didn't know what they were doing, or it just wasn't a good boat, this little boat would do a surprising job. Not now, if you had a planing boat like a Sunfish or something, no, because that's a different story. But this is a keel boat, it did an extraordinarily good job for 12.5 feet. Here's another picture. This isn't my boat. You can see the trailer. The trailer, these frames that are enclosed frames, the one I had, there was rust inside, I didn't know it. And I think the Lord likes me because I was at the house, the apartment, and I was moving the boat, and the trailer just fell apart like wet cardboard. And if I had been out on the road somewhere, it would have been a disaster, a terrible it would just been awful. So you don't want those trailers that are painted and enclosed so you can't tell if they're rusted out inside, like mine was. It was terrible. But very high quality mast, boom, rigging, the fittings, very well done manufactured boat. The interior, um, this looks like a lot of space, but it's not really. But this fellow has a couple storage bins and two. I like a person who has more than one anchor. That I don't like his anchors. He's got a mushroom anchor and a little claw anchor thing. What is that? Like those little, what do they call them? Like four-leaf clover, three-leaf. They're not a very good anchor, but yeah. At least he's got two of them. But this post here supports the mast. We were out one time out in the ocean. We left the bay, and the stays weren't too tight, I think, and going up and down, and we were in danger of losing the mast, so we had to come back and tighten everything up. This is a sad photo. I have a few of these. This is a gentleman. He's a performance artist. I think he's from Holland. Very well respected in his circle of art and friends and so on. But he decided as a performance art project to sail across the ocean in one of these guppies. And he's got a self-steering gear. He's got a bilge pump. Looks like he put on a backstay. He put on roller furling on looks probably twin jibs to go downwind when he got into the trades. But they found his boat far out in the ocean, and they never found him. So if you fall overboard on the Guppy, you can't get back on unless you have a boarding ladder or you have another boat or something. If you're in the water, it's very difficult to grab onto this and then pull yourself up. It's very hard. Um, Even from the back, it's not easy. This shows you, uh, well, actually, this is a large vehicle, but you can tow on a much smaller vehicle. This is same design, but they came out with a design that did not have the cabin. And this gentleman has made his into a little motorboat with a trolling motor. This is the performance art. I wish I could remember his name. Um, I mean, I respect him for wanting to go across the ocean in a small boat, but here he is leaving port, going backwards. That was part of his deal. I just think when you mess with the ocean, you should be more humble and respectful than being joking around. the, the ocean doesn't suffer fools gladly. It's you got to be careful. Here's a nice photo of, I guess, back in the 70s when they made these. They didn't make a lot of these because it's a regular boat. You've got the mast sails and everything, just as you would have in a larger boat, and you can make so much more money by making selling a larger boat. You didn't make as much money selling the smaller boat, but that's what they did for a while, and I'm glad they did. This is the boat after they found it. They put it somewhere in a museum or something. I don't know. Here's the specifications. I thought it was 13, but it's only 12 and a half feet long, 11.10 on the waterline. The beam is almost half the length, 5.7 inches, 5 feet 7 inches. 1 foot 2 inches, but I thought mine was like 1.6 inches or something. But I could be wrong. Ballast 150 pounds, displacement 40. That's a incredible ratio. I think that's one reason it kind of sailed because it's such a light boat and it's got a nice heavy keel, so you can sail into the wind really well. Um, Total square foot 80 feet, 48 on the jib, 32 on the main. Very small main, 32. I like when the wind was really howling. I'd like to leave the dock with a trolling motor and then put up the main. And once I left the protection of the island, I could just sail out there in the stormy weather and have a blast. Another picture of close up of you can see this is similar to Compac, but it's got a little bit harder chine. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the rudder that the Compac does that tilts up. This is a fixed rudder, and I lost my rudder 3 times. Twice we were out in the bay and we hit like a fish trap or maybe a sunken boat or something. But one time it was my fault. I was sailing close to the end of an island where there was a shoal area. It was a lot of clams or oyster shells and stuff and gravel, and I just was too shallow. You get overconfident because I would sail this in like 2 feet of water, and I would stand up and I would just uh, lean to the side and sail in very shallow water. This shows 4 people. One time I was out with my neighbor Jeff, his wife Lisa, and her brother, and we were all sailing out at night, and it sailed a little slow, but still 4 adults, and it was still responsive. I was surprised. The boat never failed to surprise me. I only had one time it didn't take care of me. The boat always took care of me. One time I was sailing and I stood up and my feet slid on the sole on the deck here and I fell over and my chest hit this part of the cabin and I almost cracked a rib. I could imagine if I cracked a rib and fell in the water, I wouldn't be able to use my arms too well to swim. But fortunately, where I sailed most of the time, it was only 3 feet of water. you, I would often wear a life jacket, and my neighbors would laugh at me because if you fell out of the boat, had more danger of breaking your arm than drowning. But I always, when I went by myself, one time I was by myself, and I was using a rod and reel, and we came behind the island, and the wind died, and I tacked. And when I did, the line wrapped around the rudder. So I pulled in the line, I reeled it in, but it was stuck. So I reached my hand down, and I'm leaning over the side of the boat into the water. and we're drifting behind the island. The wind is kind of strong that day, and my hand gets snagged on the hook that's on the lure that's wrapped around the rudder. But now my hand can't be moved. And I'm leaning over the back end of the boat with my head down close to the water, and the boat is slowly drifting away from the lee of the island out into where the wind is blowing, and we're getting closer and closer. And I'm going to be at the end of the boat, almost tipped over, and I can't move. I'm stuck. And finally, we get to almost where we're going to start getting wind, and I just threw the rod and reel in the water to take off the pressure, and was able to get some slack on the line. I couldn't put my hand in my other pocket where the knife was because it was in the other pocket, and I couldn't grab it. So it was getting kind of tricky. So I had to throw in the rod and reel, but it was shallow water. I was able to get the rod and reel back, but that was kind of a tricky day. There was a couple times I had some fun like that. Another interior shot. You can see it's not a lot of room, but once you put in cushions and stuff, if you're kind of small, if you're big, it's still going to be uncomfortable. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It's still going to be pretty tight quarters. Although your feet will go down underneath the seats. And after I sold mine, um, I don't think I bought another sailboat after that. I'm trying to remember. Well, I think I did have one, but that was the best little sailboat I ever owned. It would always take care of you. You could sail in the tiniest breath of air. It would beat other boats as big or bigger. Low maintenance. You only required a half of a quart of bottom paint. Um, you would get insulted or made fun of by other people who would walk by when you were working on it and asking if this was for your children. And I would take their remarks in stride because I knew, like I said, this boat that I had would leave the dock and go sailing 12 times more than everybody else there at the dock. It was an just incredible experience, a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment. I can remember uh, going into the wind toward the islands and to the other side of Miami Beach, and the wind is coming from the east. And then in late afternoon, early evening, when the sun's going down the west, coming back, and I'd be going downwind with the wind into the sun. And sometimes in the wintertime, all the seagulls would be coming home, and they'd be going to the east over the islands in the water. So you'd have this big, huge flocks of birds coming at you out of the sun, and the wind's pushing you homeward as the sun's going down. It's getting dark, and you're turning on your lights. I forgot to mention the boat did have one flaw beside the rudder that didn't tilt up, is if you had really strong winds and you were trying to go to windward and you had any waves at all, this boat is so light it wasn't able to punch to windward too well in strong winds with big waves. Or if you had reasonable wind but the waves were very confused, like over around 79th Street by the causeway, sometimes the chop would be coming from all different directions, and you get over there, it'd be like a tea kettle, and the boat would sometimes, it would be hard for it to go to windward in that type of situation. But if you put a lot of weight forward, like I would put the battery and some other stuff forward, and that would help it punch into the waves and the wind a little better. Otherwise, you would just have the bow being knocked around. Um, but that and the fact that the rudder did not tilt up, and the rudder was a few inches deeper than the keel, so it would hit first. That was also, I should say, the hull is very thin. It's a very thin boat. It's strong like an egg, but it's also weak like an egg, if you know what I mean. So it's not something that can take a lot of abuse. You don't want to have this bouncing against a concrete dock or another boat or something. It's very light boat, and but it's easy to fix, maintain, repair, to use, to buy, but it does have a few flaws, like everything does. So I think that those are the only things I can think of offhand. So guys, I don't think you can get a better small boat sailboat than the Guppy. Um, I have not had a better sailing experience ever. Whenever you get in a boat and the sails are up and you put your hand on the tiller and you can feel the pressure of the water responding to the rudder, your mind, everything in there that you're thinking about that was happening on shore is gone. You're no longer on shore. You're no longer on land. You're out at sea and the water and the sun and the sky and the birds and the fish, and it's just like you're not you've escaped. You're gone. You're gone. So guys, I recommend you go sailing whenever you can, but don't get something so big it owns you. Get something small like this where you own it. You can still find these for sale now and then. I sold mine to a guy, a young guy over on the West Coast, Tampa area, St. Pete. Number 73, I think, was the sale number. 73, 75, I forget. Um, yeah, it was a good boat. I'm glad Jeff and Lisa sold it to me, and we had a lot of good times. So if you're looking for a good used small sailboat, I don't know how they come any better. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Got any questions? I'll try to find some of the videos we made back in the old days out on the water with this little boat. All right. Take care. See you out there.